So let's get into the lesson of the week. And I thought that what it would be cool, and if there's any of you that were at Mega Camp and have certain ahas or things that you want to share, I want to open this up after I share my top three, really there are four, but top four ahas from Mega Camp this year. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, this was like the best Mega Camp ever. One reason why is I took a page out of Jordan Davis's book, and she said she was going to the event. So she was physically in Austin, but she watched part of the event from her hotel room and then was just bouncing back and forth between her hotel room and the networking groups, dinners, whatever else that she was doing. And I thought, man, for those of us who have a very small social battery, that was so helpful. So just wanted to throw that out there for you as far as family reunion is concerned, or future mega camps. If you're like me and you're introverted, then that's a great way to attend those events and still be able to plug in and see people and all of that. But my mega camp ahas, so three of them came from mega camp. One of them came from a mastermind that I attended before, like 2 days before we went to mega camp. The first one is, do you know the handful of things you need to be intentional about? So when you look at this business, what's cool about real estate is, although it can be a very stressful industry, it is a very simple industry. And the word that Gary really kept repeating on the second day, particularly after he interviewed Scott Maloof, and then he brought it up in his own mastermind, was intentionality. That was a word he used over and over and over again. And we live in this digital deluge of distraction. We're constantly getting more and new information, and it's tough sometimes to know what to focus on. And so when we ask that question of, do you know just a handful of things that you need to be intentional about? If you're a rainmaker, the one thing that you've heard me preach about ad nauseum is, are you winning the listing game? Because the 3Ls model, leads, listings, leverage, has never been disproven. And it's one that I think becomes cliche, meaning it's repeated and told so often that it kind of loses its luster. And yet, when you think about running a very profitable, productive, people-centered business, winning the listing game, in my opinion, is the one thing that if you are intentional about that, you virtually win at everything else. But do you know the handful of things that you need to be intentional about? The second one is, what is the problem your database has, but they don't know that they have it? So there was one guy up on stage, and I'll totally butcher his last name. His name was Dan, I think it was Ihara, I-H-A-R-A. And I believe he was from Hawaii. And one of the things that he's really passionate about is helping people set up plans after they pass away for how their real estate is ultimately going to be shared and divided amongst their families. And one of the things that he said was, he was talking to someone about their trust, and essentially that the trust just gave the real estate holdings equally to each of their children. And there wasn't enough in his opinion, enough detail, enough insight for those kids, or people, I should say, to make the right decisions. And he said, did you know that the second you pass away and this trust is executed on, that you're essentially putting your children in business together? Are you aware of that? Have you thought of it that way? And I've never thought of it that way, and thought that was really insightful. And I'm sure many of you have heard of families that have been divided, or it's created real issues amongst the kids. Gary even shared a story about, I think it was his wife's parents or somebody had passed away and left her and her sister a farm recently. And so that led me to this question of, what is the problem that your database has, but they don't know that they have it? And see, what he's discovered is that they may have a trust, but it's not detailed enough. It has to get much more specific. And he's not just highlighting the problem, he's identifying the problem and then installing a solution. So I want you to think about that question. What is a problem that my database has and that they don't know they have it? Obviously, one of the big topics around this year's mega camp, particularly with the addition of the KW Wealth segment, is wealth building, particularly through real estate, right? And I would encourage all of you, if there is still space, I doubt that there is, but September 28th to attend the KW Wealth event in Austin. I have a lot of faith in Brett Tanner. I think that he walks his talk and really knows what he's doing. But one thing that came to mind is when I was a new agent, I had a team leader who told us that anytime you sell a house to a young couple, and let's say they have 1 or 2 kids and one kid is 1 and the other is 3, that you call them up and say something like, hey, I'm just wondering if you would be open to a plan that would fund both of your kids' colleges and it would cost you virtually nothing. Would you be open to a plan like that through real estate? And long story short, essentially what she taught us was that if you buy a property and you put it on, let's say it's a 3-year-old, you put it on a 15-year note, have somebody rent it, and essentially, even if you don't really cash flow it, you just broke even on it. What happens is when that kid is 18 years old, you have a paid off home. And there's a lot of different things that you could do with that. One is you could just sell it and ultimately pay for their school or funding their business, whatever it is that they might want to do. Another is you could refinance and take the money out that they might need. And if you refinance, it's tax-free because you're essentially just borrowing against an asset and keeping the renter in there. They'll just continue to pay off what you already borrowed, right? Or if your kid turns out to be a big asshole, just keep the property. Don't give it to them. And see, that's really the advantage to investing in real estate versus a college fund, because I don't know about you, particularly after what happened last week, I think college is becoming less and less of a viable option. And if you put money into a college fund and then don't spend money on that specifically on college, and you take it out, you're going to get penalized. So the question again is, what problem does your database have that they don't know that they have it? And then how do you identify and install a solution to that? And the buying a property per kid that pays off by the time they're 18 is just an example that I'm giving you of identifying and installing a problem of a subset of people in your database. Everybody get that? Are we good? The next one is this idea of modeling. I think, again, this is an idea that's cliche, but modeling is simply a purposeful game of copying and pasting the beliefs, rituals, habits, thoughts, and actions. The beliefs, rituals, habits, thoughts, and actions of the people who are already achieving what it is that you want. And our goal first is to figure out who is achieving what it is that I already want. Who's already creating the results that I say that I want? And then how do I copy and paste those things in order for them to, or for me to get the same results? So Jenny said that she missed that. No, that doesn't surprise me, being from Oklahoma. Haha. So the question is, or what I said is, modeling is simply a purposeful game of copying and pasting the beliefs, habits, rituals, and thoughts of the people who are already achieving what it is that you want. So finding the people who are achieving what you want, and then eliciting their belief systems, eliciting the habits and rituals, teasing those things out. It can condense time. It can condense decades. And if you look at how so much of what Gary has done and the content that he creates, it comes from interviewing. So I'll never forget the first time I met Tony DeCello. He was teaching a shift class, and the question that he asked, or not the question, the challenge he made was for everyone to interview one millionaire every single month. Go to lunch, call them up, do a Zoom, whatever. And I did that for like 2 years. And unfortunately, I quit doing it. I shouldn't have. And yet, modeling that whole idea of finding who it is that's already getting what you want, interviewing them, teasing out their beliefs, their rituals, their habits, and then just copy and paste that right into your life or your business. So that was my third aha. So those were my big three this year from Mega Camp. I did mention though that there was another one that I got from a mastermind that I was on the Thursday before we went to Austin, and I was on the call with Carrie Wersch. And if you don't know Carrie, she is the lead buyer specialist for the Adam Grotti team out of Springfield. Year to date, she is at 188 closed and pended buyers and on track to close 300 buyers. And she didn't say exactly this, but I'm going to pop this into the chat box. She asked a variation of this question because we were asking her about how she's transitioning her messages to buyers in an evolving market. And the question that she ultimately, or that I kind of teased out of her is, what are the objections you're embedding in your clients through your fear, lack of clarity, understanding, or language? I accidentally put clarity in there twice. And what that means, you guys, is that if you're looking at today's market and thinking to yourself, oh, I think the market's going to crash, and that's the energy that you hold. Or if you're thinking to yourself, well, interest rates are up at 6%, I would never buy a house at 6%. You know, that's the same thing that people used to tell me when I would call expireds at 7:30 in the morning. I would share that with agents in classes, and they would say, oh man, if you called me at 7:30 in the morning, I'd give you an earful. And I would always say, that's great, but understand this, you're not somebody who's been sitting in a home that's been shown 30 or 40 times for 6 months, wanting to move there, but being stuck here. So what you're doing is casting your own belief system onto somebody else, and it's limiting your opportunity. And by the way, thank you for doing that, because it's just less agents calling expireds and less competition for me. But think about the way you're talking to people, because it's interesting. I've seen this time and time again over the years, and many of the rainmakers who've been in the industry for a long time could attest to this, is that sometimes new agents embed objections inside of the relationship between them and a seller or a buyer purely through the way that they talk. And it's a hard thing to realize. It's a hard thing to be aware of. I remember when I first started out, and so many people would talk to me about how young I looked because I was 22 years old, and that got into my head. And then when I just nailed scripts and dialogues, when I knew them forwards and backwards, guess what? That whole too young conversation never came up again. Or if you've ever had a time when somebody was consistently beating you up on commission, it felt like every time you went into a listing presentation that somebody was going to bring up commission, and you got really good at the objection handler. Like the best question I ever found on this was, you know, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I'm curious, is it what it costs you that's more important, or what you put in your pocket when it's all said and done? The second that I had that objection handler nailed forward and backwards, it stopped coming up. People stopped objecting to the commission. So I know that that's kind of a weird phenomenon, but that question is in the chat box, and I would encourage all of you, particularly those who are rainmakers or agents on a team, to be asking yourself, what are the objections that I'm embedding in my clients through my fear, lack of clarity, or lack of understanding? And what I really mean there is about your value, the market, what have you. And one thing that will pop into the chat or into the Facebook group today is a questions and objections log. See, as the market changes, so do the questions and the objections. And I would encourage you all, as you're going through the week, when you get a question you really don't feel like you have a good answer to, or an objection that you're either not able to overcome, or it feels like blood and guts to overcome it, write it down. And then bring that to us, and we can figure out the best way to answer that question or overcome that objection. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Those were my 3 big ahas, I guess 3 from Mega Camp, 1 from that mastermind that I got. Before we end this today, is there anyone that has something different that you want to share with the group that you learned from Mega Camp? Just keep time. I rambled a lot today, so just keep time and perspective. But anybody else? Going once, twice. So, okay, well, I'm looking forward to talking to you all this week. Thank you for being here. What we covered, everything from the registration on Zoom to the Ironman to the question of an objections log, all of that will be put into the Facebook group today. Thank you all for being here. The breakout room should be open. And oh, thank you, Casey. There's her ahas too. I don't know if that was Josh or Casey, but copy and paste those. Those were really good. All right, everybody. Thank you. Talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.